Well, hello and welcome to another subscriber reaction video, this time coming from Luis Cisneros from Mexico. If you would like a free piano lesson, send me an email at josh.V.Piano@gmail.com or DM me on my Facebook or Instagram. Luis is working on the second concerto of Rachmaninoff and had a couple of questions on how to best approach his practice. As you can see on the video, accuracy, pedaling, and evenness are the main things that makes me struggle. I already know the notes. You can tell how my hands work quickly, moves to the next note to be ready to play it, but there comes a point which I start to lose it, and that's because I'm feeling that I'm not giving the correct duration of the 6 or 9 tuplets, and I find very difficult to practice at the same velocity like a robot all this section. In some points I feel I really need to breathe to reach the next arpeggio. So practicing with the metronome at this point, because I did use it when I was starting to learn it, is very frustrating. Now, you didn't actually play the very opening measures, but I'm going to talk about it just for a second as a little bonus tip. So Luis's video actually started on bar 8, before which are these famous chords. And I just wanted to throw out a little bonus tip that I received from my previous Russian teacher, Nina Lolchuk. When she was playing this, she often got the comment, how do you make and build up so much sound in the opening where it goes from pianissimo, it crescendos all the way up to fortissimo. So she actually recommended not lifting the damper pedal through the entire opening line. The immediate assumption is that this will cause the opening to be muddy because you have a blend of... But if it's spaced out correctly, especially with the aid of this bass, it can actually build the sound on top of itself without actually sounding that muddy. When she first played it, I had no idea that it was pedaled throughout. I'm not going to play the entire first section. I'm going to play several bars of it so we can talk about it from there. Okay, first impressions, like you said, yes, you're pretty confident in which shape, which notes the hands need to play, and you clearly haven't memorized. So really good job. That's a lot of the bulk of the work that's done right from the beginning. Now, starting at the video which Luis sent in, we have the time values in quarter notes. So quarter notes with a ritardando, meaning that it wants to slow down. I would just caution you, make sure that these quarter notes are not exactly the tempo of the half notes coming up. The timing that you are playing here is almost double time. Is almost in half time. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. So make sure that it's not equal. Yes, it should be slower, but not all the way slowed down to the value of a half note. Also, try to make the timing of this ritardando coincide with this and not the grace note. So whichever rate of speed you decline at, bum, 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 da. So don't let the grace note affect the natural slowing down. A lot of people have commented about these opening arpeggios that the way the orchestra is playing, you can't really hear the piano very well. Rachmaninoff wrote this piece coming out of a deep, long depression, and his confidence was basically shot. He thought he wasn't a good composer, he thought he wasn't a good performer, and he was nervous on stage. It's been said that, therefore, he wrote this with a very easy opening so that he could sort of warm up while on the stage, and the orchestra's playing and you can't really hear the piano too well. That being said, the things that you can hear very clearly are the bass and the upper notes, which you brought out really well. In regards to sounding robotic and how to avoid that, I would actually start out by trying to think about the shape of the bass line. So think about, how do you want the shape of this bass line to go? If it were... Are you wanting to bring it down here or bring it up? So think of that bass line, even though it's sort of separated and it's only at half beats, if you think of it almost as a melody, it can create shape through this whole entire line. And through that shape, you can also swell up to the higher notes here. I do think that when you are playing up to the pinky, you can probably give a little bit more of a release. That'll help you to relax. It'll also help the sound to flow more naturally. So if you only play these as written in the arpeggio form, you might miss some of the ways that you could think about this from a harmonic perspective. For instance, when we get into here, the things that stick out to me are this little inner voice. I think that's where a lot of the tension lies. So maybe you might want to bring out that tension resolution within the line itself. All right, let's listen to a little bit more of his playing. Another thing that I would try to bring out is the difference between bar 19, where the theme is restated, versus bar 9, where the theme starts. It goes in a different direction, and you can probably bring out the change in direction a little bit more. So the biggest part where that change occurs, I think, is here, starting around 23. So you might want to voice or create this shape in the line. It doesn't have to be that shape, but it needs a shape. Now, another one of the tricky parts about this, as you mentioned, sometimes there are 6 sextuplets, sometimes there are non-uplets, sometimes there are 7 in a beat, sometimes there are 10. It just varies depending on the shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 18, he has 2 9s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the way that I choose to think about it is not really as subdivisions at all. I'm only trying to think of dee da da dee dum da dee da dum. So I'm really thinking of it in 2, which you may already be doing. But the actual division, I'm not worrying so much about subdivision, because this is not the style of music like a Stockhausen or later Stravinsky, where it's supposed to be absolutely mathematically precise in its subdivisions. I think this is more like Chopin, where Chopin has like a 21/3 subdivision run. So given that fact, you can kind of change the way that you approach the inner line between bass and treble. I could do this a number of ways. I could kind of accelerate, spend more time here, or I could go the opposite way. And doing this well and effectively also can help the musicians who are working with you, because whether or not they realize it, speeding up through all 9 notes within the space of 2 or slowing down can actually better prepare them for what you're about to do. So here's an example of something you can do with the phrase. That's one example. You could do something different. There are a bunch of different ways you can shape it and use rubato, but that is a big way that you can keep it from being mechanical or robotic. And I would kind of practice trying to get different directional shapes. And depending on whether you speed up or slow down towards the end of a figure, that will determine what kind of emphasis the following note gets. All right, so let's keep watching. All right, this is the first area where I feel like it really starts to drag, going into measure 35. So no matter what happens, I think you can always think and feel this part in 2. So here the texture changes at 27. So I'm really trying to be free, but remember what the orchestra is doing. And they're really thinking in these larger phrases, so this is all filler. And the same rules apply towards if you want to sweep up to the top and then slow down. Or but when you get to here, this is something that you need to base, I think, the idea of your rhythm more on the right hand than the left. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And to keep this idea of 2 cut time, I would definitely make a clean pedal at the top. Clean pedal. So pedaling on every measure, at least here. So going through this phrase from 35 through 40, 41. Again, that larger shape is going to be important in making it not feel, because now it starts to feel a little bit vertical, a little bit heavy. So if you kind of conduct through the larger shapes, there can be a little bit of pushing and pulling because you have a really pretty good grasp of the fundamentals of the rhythm. Now it's just the shape and the rhythmic flow. In these measures, make sure that you don't lose the bass. I feel like the bass was better voiced earlier on, and as it progresses, I don't hear that bass sound out so clearly. Personally, here around 43, I would try to not make it so obvious the subdivisions like which is, I mean, it's technically correct, but I don't think is so necessary. I would try to almost kind of blur that distinction because in my opinion, the more important thing is the harmonies and the way they're built from bottom to top and the way that they flow. So what makes up those harmonies is that sweep. That's the idea, is and playing them blocked like that helps you to determine the overall shape without getting stuck in the moment to moment. Okay, so here, keep in mind that the orchestra is thinning out. So the problem that you had in the initial arpeggios where the orchestra is so loud and you can hardly hear the pianist, now that the orchestra is thinning, you can bring down that middle voice substantially in the mix. So what I mean is the running eighth notes. You definitely want this upper line to be espressivo. He writes mezzo forte in the upper line. So through this line, you want to keep this upper line, the lyrical line, flowing despite what happens. So maybe you can bring out a little bit of this, a little bit of this, but everything else is not as important as this. All right, so now we're on to the lyrical E flat major theme. regards to your question about pedaling, I do think you can hold on to the pedal a bit longer to keep the legato line of the upper voices a little bit better. But even more than that, what stands out to me is voicing. I would definitely voice down what's happening in the left hand. You're a total solo now, so there's a lot more nuance that can be added in the shape of the left hand. The way I pedal, I'm actually holding the pedal all the way through each measure, only changing pedal at the downbeat. If you're doing a little bit of flutter, some people might. I don't really think it's that important, especially in a big hall. It wouldn't wash out the harmonies. Here, when there's a very clear change, yeah, I would pedal in the middle. Change, change, but hold, change, change, hold, hold. So there's actually a couple moments in the Rock 3 where I did this. Generally speaking, you want to pedal based off what's happening in the left hand, but it almost works better the other way, to pedal based off what's happening in the right hand. As you're looking at the whole phrase too, I would play these back to back, just like this. So I'd play a couple measures. And then jump down to measure 93. Just to see how your sound has changed between the piano and the mezzo forte. Those should have pretty distinct and clear sounds. So besides the difference in dynamics stated in the themes when it's piano and mezzo forte, you can also think about how to change the pacing. For instance, if it starts piano, maybe mezzo forte could be shaped different. And this is a matter of change in interpretation, so just be aware of every time where you have repeated material to shape it differently in dynamics, in voicing, in timing. Think about all those different aspects. As you said, you don't want it to sound robotic or mechanical. So looking at it from various different angles can really help to bring out the musicality of your playing. Anyways, there you go, Luis. And to anyone watching, I hope that was helpful. I'm still taking in videos, guys, so if you would like any help, if you find these helpful and you have any questions regardless of your level, you can remain totally anonymous if you want. Go ahead and send me that email or that DM, and you could get your free piano lesson. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I've got several videos coming up. We're going to be returning soon to the Rock 3 series. So until then, I will see you guys in the next video.